Hey everybody, good morning. It's Dr. May here. It's Saturday morning in New York, and want to bring you lesson 2 of Radically Open DBT. Okay, so this is a pretty interesting module. Well, not module, I guess, lesson, I guess they call it, right? So this one's called Understanding Emotions, but it's not exactly what you think. This is actually, they're going over 5 different categories of responses that we have. And it kind of facilitates some greater self-awareness because we're always in one of these 5 states. And it kind of helps us understand the way we move around in the world a little bit. Okay, so one of the main ideas is that for our survival purposes and our well-being, right, our body and brain are set up to always be scanning our environment for emotionally relevant cues. Okay, so whether we're conscious of it or not, this is always happening. Okay, so it's looking on the outside, right, as well as on the inside, to try to pick up different things that are going on and to give us a sense of what's happening and if we need to respond. Is it good? Is it bad? Or is it neutral, right? Is it helping me? Is it hurting me? And it kind of mobilizes or prepares us for how to deal with those things. Okay, so we're basically wired up to detect and respond to 5 different classes of these emotionally relevant cues. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about those 5 cues. Okay, and then you could take that information and then be more aware of yourself and which of those 5 categories you might be in. Okay, so first we're going to talk about, so these are the 5, I forgot about this slide. These are the 5 cue categories we're going to talk about. So there's safety cues, novelty cues, rewarding cues, threatening cues, and overwhelming cues. Okay, so we're going to go over these one by one and break them down. Okay, so first, safety cues. Okay, so this is like when we pick up cues or stimuli that are associated with, feeling safe, feeling protected and connected, feeling cared for and loved, part of a community, like a sense of protection and belonging. Okay, and it's really important for us to have at least some access to this feeling of safety. Okay, so here's some example of safety cues, because sometimes we might struggle with how to feel safe, right? Maybe our system is always wired up to detect threat and we have a hard time settling down and feel safe, right? So here's some examples of safety cues that might happen to be in your environment or things you could actually seek out yourself to create a greater feeling of safety. Okay, so one is, if you're an animal person, just being with your beloved pet and petting your animal. Having a really cozy, warm beverage such as hot cocoa or hot tea or coffee, or something that just kind of brings that inner feeling of warmth to you. Okay, some people really feel safe and connected in nature. So taking a walk in a park or spending some time in a natural environment could be great. Sitting by a warm, cozy fireplace. Being with kids, like, really cute kids, like a laughing child. Getting a hug from somebody you trust that feels really nice. Or just like really connecting with people that are in your network that you feel comfortable with, such as like sharing a meal together with friends or family, listening to a certain person's voice, just hearing the voice of someone you care about could help, or getting a nice warm smile from somebody. Okay, so those are just examples of some things that could bring on a feeling of safety. And if it's not possible right now to have actual access to some of these external things, one of the things that can help is to bring it up internally. So you could think about any one of these things or even other things in your mind, and that could also help to bring up a feeling of safety. Okay? All right. So one of the things that we could keep in mind is when we feel safe, we're both comfortable exploring our environment and connecting with people. Okay, so we feel so comfortable that we're able to go out and try new things, or engage in activities and feel comfortable doing that. And we're also comfortable being around people. We feel more social, more open, and stuff like that. So some emotions associated with these. So for example, while exploring, you might feel calm, content, receptive and open to what the environment is showing you. You might be curious about looking into new things in your environment, and a sense of fulfillment, like I'm enjoying what I'm doing. Okay. When you're connected, you feel kind of protected and secure with the people you're with, like you could trust them. You might feel a sense of being loved or cared for by those people. When you're comfortable, you feel approachable, like that you wouldn't mind if people come to you and start striking up a conversation. You might feel more relaxed and playful with people, like you could laugh a little bit, you could be lighthearted, take a joke, stuff like that. And you just feel like a greater sense of belonging, like that sense of, like I said before, being part of a community or a tribe, so to speak. Okay, so both of those components are associated with safety. Okay, and one of the things, just so you know, to come in Radically Open DBT is that there's going to be some techniques in future lessons that I'm going to go over with you that help to maximize our feeling of social engagement and safety. Okay, so we could be better able to connect with people. So stay tuned for all that. Okay, so physical signs of our social safety system. So another way to tell if we're feeling socially engaged and safe is to tune into our physical signs. Or if we want to see it in somebody else, we could probably notice it in other people by looking at some of their, physical presentation, their body language. Okay, so when we're comfortable, when we're feeling socially safe, we're able to make that really good eye contact because we're comfortable looking at the person, right? We could effortlessly make facial expressions. Like we're feeling kind of relaxed, we're able to smile, we're able to facially react, okay? We have a more prosodic or musical tone of voice because our vocal cords are more relaxed. Our body feels relaxed. Our breathing's a little slower and deeper. Heart rate goes down, okay? You might not be super in tune with your heart rate, but it actually does lower a little bit, okay? You feel comfortable touching and being touched, obviously in an appropriate way, right? So you have to be safe with a person to feel like that can happen and be okay with it, okay? Your eardrums tighten in such a way that you're more attuned to the frequencies of the human voice, so you're actually able to better listen to other people. And our neck muscles are more relaxed, just like our body's more relaxed. And that helps us to kind of, direct our gaze more easily to things in our environment and obviously to other people, right? We're not all clammed up like a turtle, okay? All right, so novelty cues. So I was looking for pictures, trying to think of like, what would be something that would be kind of quirky for a novelty cues? And I saw this one and it just made me do a double take. So I think this one's definitely a novelty cue, right? It's like, what the heck? A face is growing on the back of that guy's head. So anyway, so something novel is something new, right? So it's something that kind of like grabs your attention, that's kind of strikes you as something unusual in your environment, right? So most things are kind of like blending into the background. We don't pay attention to every little detail. It's just kind of, unconsciously observed. But when something pops up that's a little strange, we kind of go, well, what's that, right? So that's a novelty cue. So it's like a discrepant or unexpected stimuli, okay? Such as a guy with a face on the back of his head, okay? So when we come across these, it automatically triggers our system to say, hey, what's that, right? So we're automatically trying to evaluate, is this good, is this dangerous, or is this neutral, okay? So we're trying to figure out, is this important for our well-being, and how should we respond, okay? So because this is a little more unusual, I will give you some examples of novel cues. Okay, so like if you heard a loud noise, like bang, like in the background, you automatically would probably look toward that noise and try to figure out what the heck is that, right? If you're driving down the road and you see a car crash, you know how everyone's a rubbernecker, they're all looking, right? Because everyone's trying to figure out what's that thing on the side of the highway, right? We're trying to figure out what that novel cue is. If I was a music teacher for a really long time, probably about 17 years or so, giving private lessons, and when someone's playing a piece and it's fine, it's nice, and all of a sudden there's like a wrong note or a squeak or something out of tune, it makes you go, oh, what's that, right? And even if you're not a musical person, like if you were watching somebody perform and you heard a wrong note, it probably would grab your attention. Okay, so that's another novel cue. If you're kind of a detail-oriented person, something like a crooked picture on the wall could grab your attention, or like a misplaced, word, or the wrong kind of spacing or the wrong punctuation in a sentence if you're reading something, right? That could kind of grab your attention. An unusually dressed person, right? If you're kind of just walking down the street or at a store and all of a sudden someone looks like that lady over there with the rainbow fur and stuff like that, that probably would grab your attention. One time I was hiking somewhere out west, I think it was in North Dakota, and there was a guy and he was hiking with this giant furry duck backpack. And I was like, what the heck is that? So that was certainly a novel cue, not something you see every day on the trail, for sure. Or even something like a strange smell in the air. Like, where's that smell coming from, right? So see how that would grab your attention, right? All these are novel cues. Okay, so I tried to find a picture of a person in this kind of a posture responding to a novel cue, but I just couldn't find it. So here's a rabbit, okay? But we basically kind of do the same thing that animals do, right? So even if animals hear a loud bang or hear some rustling in the bushes, they orient too. So this is an orienting response because we're trying to turn our attention toward the unusual stimuli and figure out what it is, right? So see how the rabbits kind of like turn towards something? We do that too, okay? So we stop, look, and listen, trying to use our senses to figure this out in kind of like a curious way. We're trying to evaluate, okay? In the process, we might temporarily hold our breath and kind of like freeze and stand still, right? So if I stop moving, it's a little more still so I can kind of listen better and figure out what's going on. But I'm prepared to move. I'm prepared to take the next step to deal with this novel cue, okay? So while I'm preparing for action, my heart rate and blood pressure go up a little bit, right? So it's kind of like you're at the beginning of the race and you're ready to bolt, right? Something like that. You may not have to, but your body's getting ready. Okay, next, okay, rewarding cues. All right, we're gonna anticipate getting something great. Woo, let's get a reward, right? So a rewarding cue is something that's appraised to us as being potentially exciting, gratifying, pleasurable, like something you're looking forward to that's gonna make you feel really good, right? So that could be a whole variety of things, okay? And I'm not gonna have a slide going over all of them because there's probably a million things and they're different for everybody. Like for some people, getting an A on a test would be a rewarding cue. Other people being told, wow, you did an amazing job would be a rewarding cue. Other people getting their, an ounce of cocaine would be a rewarding cue. It really depends on the person, okay? So just kind of like think about what's rewarding for you, and as I describe it coming up next, think about what might trigger this for you, all right? So this is how we respond to rewarding cues. So we're anticipating something pleasurable is about to occur, right? And we're like, oh my God, this is so great, like that guy in the picture, so cute. So we're feeling excited, elated, goal-driven, like I want to pursue that thing. That's going to make me feel really good. Okay, so as we're getting excited about it, our breathing and our heart rate start to go up. Okay, so we have a desire to approach the rewarding cue. All right, in this case, in the bottom left, so the little girl might feel like getting a hug from her mom's rewarding, or whoever that woman happens to be. Like, oh wow, I'm going to run toward you and get a hug, and it's going to be so great, right? But we could also run toward other kinds of things that we think are going to make us feel great, okay? And because we're getting excited, right? Think of what happens to people when they get excited. So their conversations get more animated, they have bigger gestures, like, yeah, it's great, I'm gonna win, right? What if someone told you you just won a big contest or you won $1,000? You'd be like, yeah, right? So big gestures. And you end up being more fun to be around just because you're like in a good mood and you're excited, okay? All right, but there's a little bit of a downside, okay? So sometimes you could be so wound up about anticipating this reward that you can't even sleep, all right? So think of kids on Christmas Eve night, right? Tomorrow morning, I'm gonna get these amazing presents from Santa, and I'm so excited I could hardly sleep, right? Exactly like that, okay? But other times you might be so focused on your goals that you kind of like block out other things. Like if all you're thinking about in a negative sense, right? If let's say I'm a cocaine addict and all I'm thinking about is getting my next fix of cocaine, my whole life might be wrapped around getting my next fix. And so I'm not leaving room for other things in my life, right? So relationships might fall by the wayside, my job might fall by the wayside, my hobbies might fall by the wayside, because I'm narrowing my attention to that drug that I want so badly, okay? So sometimes it kind of limits our life a little bit because we're so focused on that one thing, all right? Sometimes could be a downside. It also isn't the best for social engagement. I mean, you can be fun to be around because you're really excited, but there is a few little downsides to the interaction. So let's look at that, the picture down there, right? So there's a guy maybe giving a lecture about something and he's really excited about it. So maybe he's talking about radically open DBT because it's so cool. And he's really getting animated. He's talking about it, but everyone's falling asleep. Okay. So he might be so wrapped up in his excitement that he's not that attentive to the social cues of other people. So he may not be fully registering that people are bored because he's excited. Okay. And he may not be as empathetic to the way they're feeling about it just because he's excited. Okay. So you might become a little self-focused or a little dominating, just keep talking about the thing that you're into, and you may not be as attentive to other people and their needs. Okay. Sometimes even you might, because you're excited, talk louder and faster than other people in the room and not even realize it. Or you might explode with different feelings that may not be fully appropriate to the situation, right? You might like start giggling in a board meeting just because, whatever it is, or whatever, just maybe like an expression of emotion that doesn't quite, it's just, one of the downsides. Okay, next, threatening cues. Okay, so sometimes we feel physically threatened or even emotionally threatened, okay? And we perceive things to be a potential threat to our well-being in some way, okay? So potentially dangerous, potentially damaging. It could be some kind of really bullying kind of a person, an abusive person, a dangerous animal, a situation where our job could be at stake, our health could be at stake, right? So we might perceive something in the environment as threatening, okay? All right, so what happens when we feel threatened? So obviously, as you might guess, we anticipate that something bad's gonna happen, right? I'm gonna be hurt in some way. We might feel that our desired goal may be blocked, okay? So what does that mean? So it means that, let's say my goal is to have well-being, and somebody's putting something in the way of that. So maybe they're mistreating me, and my goal of well-being is getting threatened, okay? Or let's say I'm trying to have, a peaceful time at work. I'm trying to get my job done, and someone's threatening me by, trying to put something in the way of that, or trying to like steal my thunder, or trying to steal my ideas. And now I feel threatened by that because it could impact my job, right? So whatever that means for you. So usually anger is about overcoming a blockage. So when we feel threatened and we want to respond with anger, it's to try to remove that blockage, okay? So when we feel threatened, we're trying to brace up and protect ourselves, okay? So our body is tense, we might be sweating, okay? Our breath might be fast and shallow because we're getting ready to run, and our heart rate goes up because we're preparing for action, okay? I'm sure that picture on the bottom left was photoshopped. I'm sure that little girl was not being chased by lions, but basically we have certain kind of symbolic lions that we feel threatened by sometimes, and we're trying to get away from them, right? So we feel anxious, we feel irritated, we feel like we gotta, deal with this threat, okay? Because it's impacting my well-being. So the main way we try to respond to a threat is fight or flight, right? So we try to fight off the threatening person or object, or we try to get away from it, okay? So the irritated anger part is more of a fight, and the anxious fearful part is more of the flight, okay? So it's a mobilized response. Okay, this also happens to impact us a lot socially, okay? If you're feeling lonely, if you have social anxiety, you feel threatened by a social situation, okay? You may not feel like somebody's gonna physically attack you, but you might feel really uncomfortable, almost like, the interaction could be emotionally threatening, okay? So we respond, and the way we respond, unfortunately, makes it even harder for us to connect. So I could be lonely and really want a connection, but when I'm feeling isolated and threatened, I respond in ways that makes it harder for me to connect. So I kind of get stuck in this social isolation loneliness cycle, okay? My loneliness video, by the way, goes over this in much greater detail, but here, I'm just gonna go over a few things here. So what happens to us socially when we feel threatened? So we're feeling a little constricted, right? When we're threatened, we're not able to make easy facial expressions like we are when we're socially engaged. Our facial expressions are constricted because we're kind of anxious, right? We have a hard time giving a genuine smile because our muscles are tight, and so we can only maybe force a fake smile, okay? Our voice gets more monotone or more strident. We might have a hard time making comfortable eye contact, so we might either avoid their gaze if we're a little fearful, or we might get into fight mode and have more of a hostile gaze. We might misinterpret cues as maybe they don't like me, or maybe I'm not good enough, or why did they say that? We might have more reading a hostile intent into something that's actually kind of neutral because we're sensing threat where maybe there's not threat, okay? And because we're trying to protect ourselves, our gestures might get small. We might have body language that's kind of self-protective, such as that woman folding her arms across her chest, right? It's almost like we're trying to protect our vital organs. So essentially, because we're in threat mode, we're trying to protect ourselves. We're not as empathic as if we're socially engaged and comfortable and safe, right? So we're so worried about protecting ourselves that we're not really putting ourselves in other people's shoes, imagining where they could be coming from, easily reading the intention behind their words, right? We're just seeing it through the eyes of threat, okay? And as you can tell, our pro-social signaling is impaired, right? So, my face is tight, my gestures are tight, I'm not really giving off this vibe that I'm really receptive and open and comfortable with this person, okay? So this gets in the way of us connecting. So that's why social anxiety is so hard. We have to learn how to overcome these things. But luckily, in future lessons of DBT, there's tips for how to do this, okay? So stay tuned to my future videos, and I will have stuff about that. Okay, finally, overwhelming cues, okay? So sometimes a threat is so overwhelming that we can't run away and we can't fight off the threat. So what happens is we get into our emergency shutdown system, and it's almost like a freeze response or a playing dead response. Because let's say those bears are coming after you, and you can't fight off a bear. They're too big and strong for us, right? We can't, run away from them because they're way too fast for us. So what does our body do? It shuts down. Same thing if we had abusive experiences growing up, right? If you're a little kid, you can't fight off a parent. You can't, run away from a parent. Where are you going to go? you're little, right? So you kind of adapt this freeze shutdown response. And sometimes your body gets so used to doing that response that it keeps doing it later in life. And it does it even in situations where it may not have to do it, okay? But this is one of our emotional responses. It's in our repertoire. We all have this in one extent or another, okay? All right, so what happens when we're overwhelmed? All right, so again, we can't use our mobilized responses such as fight or flight, so we use an immobilized response to conserve energy and maximize survival, right? So if I were to play dead as an animal, that's probably my best shot in this situation, right? Because maybe they'll think I'm dead and they'll leave me alone, or they'll just take a bite and forget about it, right? But at least, I can't fight and I can't flee, so what am I supposed to do? Because this is our body's adaptation. Okay, so what happens to our body and behavior when we're overwhelmed, okay? Look at the picture of the woman on the left, right? So her facial expression is very constricted, right? She's kind of looking spaced out. She's maybe like, feeling very frozen on the inside. If she's speaking at all, her speech might be very monotone or kind of slow, kind of thing that's slowed shut down, right? Her heart rate and breathing slow down, right? If you're like playing dead, your body slows down as if you're kind of getting closer to death, okay? Not that we die from this, okay? Just to remember that. Insensitive to pain. So endorphins are released so that if an animal, let's say, were to bite you, you wouldn't feel the pain as much, right? So I hate to say it, but that's kind of what happens. And that kind of contributes to some of the numbing feeling, all right? Your body might feel very still. You might feel kind of like you can't move, or it's an effort to move, okay? When you're depressed, this is also a feeling you might get. This is associated with this shutdown. Cognitively, I mean, in your mind, right? This is when dissociation might happen, right? So if you have any issues with dissociation, it's because this emergency shutdown system is in play, okay? So when you can't escape physically, sometimes our adaptation is to try to escape mentally, right? So the next best thing is to not be present while you're being hurt, okay? So your mind was trying to help you by zoning out or dissociating or going somewhere else, okay? And it's like, well, thank you for trying to help me. I appreciate it. But sometimes in my life right now, this dissociation response is getting in my way, right? Maybe I'm missing parts of life, or I'm having a hard time getting through the day present because my body just automatically goes into this shutdown, right? So this is very common in trauma, and it's very important to deal with this symptom if you have it, okay? So you might feel like you're dissociating, you're trance-like, you're not fully responsive, you're losing time, you might even faint in some cases, like when your body shuts down. It's kind of rare, but it's possible, okay? So these are just clues that you're in this, emergency shutdown mode. Okay, so let's pull all the strings together here. Right, so we have 5 different cues, emotionally relevant cues that we could respond to, and our body responds in 5 different ways. So we're always in one of those 5 states, okay? And we could always move from one to another. So if one isn't working, our body could shift to a different one. So for example, if I can't run away and I can't flee, right, if I can't have a mobilized response, my body will shift to a shutdown response. The good news is, though, we could also learn how to increase the amount of time we spend in a social engagement response, right, where we feel safe. And there's definitely skills for that, and we're going to go over that in future videos. So that's another one we can learn to shift into. Okay, so we always have the possibility of adding that into our repertoire even more. Okay, so these are the 5 again, right, just to pull it all together. So as a kind of a little homework, try to be mindful of times when you're in these different responses, right? So think about, what's my mind doing? What's my body doing? What do I feel like doing? And it gives you some clues as to which cue category you're in, right? And then once you realize that, you could then start to make some choices about, how could I shift into a safety social engagement response? Okay? So there we go. All right. So I hope that enlightened you a little bit and gave you some clues about your own responses to the world. And remember, in future videos, we're going to talk about how to increase that safety social engagement response. So stay tuned. Okay, guys, have a good day. I'll see you soon.